On the morning of July 19th, 2026, the United States Central Command confirmed what military families across the country had been dreading since the war began. A third American service member had been killed in less than 48 hours. The death toll from the U.S. Israel war on Iran had reached 17, and it was still climbing. The sequence of events that produced those numbers unfolded with brutal speed across two countries and two entirely different sets of circumstances. Understanding how those Americans died and where requires stepping back to the beginning of a conflict that is now nearly 5 months old, and to the specific week in July that changed the trajectory of everything that came after. The war that started in February, right. The 2026 Iran war began on February 28th. The United States and Israel launched what was codenamed Operation Epic Fury, a massive joint strike campaign targeting Iran's nuclear infrastructure, its ballistic missile program, and the leadership of the Iranian regime itself. Closed. The opening salvo killed Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Within hours, Iran had closed the Strait of Hormuz to international shipping and launched hundreds of retaliatory drones and missiles at American military installations across the Middle East. In the weeks that followed, 6 U.S. Army Reserve soldiers were killed on March 1st when Iran struck directly at a makeshift operations center at Kuwait's Shuaibah port. Days later, an Army sergeant died after sustaining injuries during an attack in Saudi Arabia. The casualties continued to accumulate across multiple countries, Kuwait, Jordan, the Gulf states, as Iran deployed what had become its signature weapon, the Shahed one-way attack drone, manufacturable at an estimated cost of $30,000 each, capable of overwhelming far more expensive American interceptor systems simply through volume. By early April, active fighting had produced a ceasefire of sorts. Pakistan brokered a 2-week pause beginning April 8th. Talks followed. In June, a memorandum of understanding was announced, intended to formally end the conflict within 60 days. The Strait of Hormuz was to reopen, but American and Iranian negotiators were still at the table as late as early July. Then the MOU unraveled. The ceasefire collapses. Iran had never fully accepted the terms the United States demanded. Washington insisted on three things: that all channels of the Strait of Hormuz be declared open without tolls, that Iranian attacks on commercial shipping cease entirely, and that Iran's highly enriched uranium stockpile be handed over. Tehran refused on each point. In the weeks following the June memorandum, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps established what it called the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, effectively a toll regime on vessels passing through the strait, backed by military enforcement. On July 6th and 7th, Iranian forces fired on 3 commercial vessels that had bypassed Iran's pre-approved shipping routes. The United States responded with strikes. Trump publicly declared at the NATO summit on July 8th that the ceasefire was over. By the second week of July, American forces were conducting nightly strikes against Iranian targets for the 8th consecutive night. Iran was responding with drones and ballistic missiles aimed at American assets across the Gulf region, Kuwait, Bahrain, Jordan, and beyond. Al-Azraq Air Base in Jordan, also known as Muwafaq Salti Air Base, had been a target before. Located approximately 100 kilometers east of Amman, the installation hosts the U.S. 407th Air Expeditionary Group, MQ-9 Reaper drone operations, and Jordanian F-16 squadrons. It had been used as a strategic hub for operations against ISIS since 2014. On July 9th alone, Iran had launched 10 ballistic missiles at the base. Jordan successfully intercepted 8 of them. There were no casualties in that attack. The base's luck did not hold. July 17th, the strike on Al-Azraq. On the night of July 17th, 2026, as CENTCOM and partner forces were conducting active defense operations against another round of Iranian ballistic missile and drone attacks, 2 U.S. service members at Al-Azraq Air Base were killed in action. 4 more were medically evacuated to hospitals in Jordan. A third service member was reported missing. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps claimed responsibility. In a statement, the IRGC said it had targeted fuel storage facilities at Al-Azraq as part of what it designated the 14th phase of Operation Lightning, its own operational framework for strikes on American installations. CENTCOM's statement was characteristically precise and deliberately incomplete. Names were withheld pending notification of next of kin. What the command did confirm was this: the strike involved both ballistic missiles and drones. U.S. and partner forces were actively defending against the attack when the casualties occurred. U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth responded publicly. "Godspeed, heroes," he wrote. "Their sacrifice only stiffens our resolve." Rice, in Washington, officials who had been watching the pattern of Iranian strikes in Jordan over the preceding week expressed a concern that went beyond the immediate casualties. There had been 4 separate Iranian missile attacks hitting U.S. forces on bases in Jordan in the span of a single week. Dozens of American service members had been wounded across those incidents. Several helicopters had been destroyed. The pattern suggested that Iran had identified and was actively exploiting vulnerabilities in the American defensive posture in Jordan. The interceptor systems that had performed reliably in prior engagements were not catching everything. Something had changed. Something had difficult. The missing service member remained unaccounted for through the night of July 17th and into the following morning. On Sunday, July 19th, CENTCOM announced that a thorough search of the attack site had produced results. U.S. military personnel found unidentified remains at the location earlier today, the statement read. An examination process to verify the remains is ongoing. The identity of the recovered remains had not been confirmed as of publication. July 18th, northern Iraq, Rise. While CENTCOM was still searching for the missing service member in Jordan, a separate incident unfolded more than 1,000 kilometers away in northern Iraq. On Saturday, July 18th, a U.S. service member was killed during what CENTCOM described as a controlled detonation of unexploded ordnance from a downed Iranian one-way attack drone. A second service member suffered mild injuries in the same detonation. The term controlled detonation carries a specific technical meaning. When an unexploded munition cannot be safely transported or stored, military explosive ordnance disposal teams attempt to render it inert in place. The procedure follows established protocols. It is considered the safest available option when disarming the device directly is not possible. It is not, however, without risk. In this instance, the controlled detonation resulted in the death of a trained U.S. military service member. CENTCOM declined to name the service member killed. The exact location in northern Iraq was not provided. The death brought the total number of American service members killed since the start of the U.S.-Israel war on Iran to 17. Military Times confirmed the figure. Al Jazeera confirmed the figure. The number was not in dispute. The accumulating toll, the 2 incidents of July 17th and 18th, Jordan and Iraq, did not occur in isolation. They were the most recent additions to a casualty list that had been building since the war's first hours in February. 6 Army Reserve soldiers died on March 1st at Kuwait's Shuaibah port in a direct Iranian strike on their operations center. An Army sergeant died days later in Saudi Arabia. Commander Gabriel Edwards, commanding officer of the Navy's Helicopter Sea Combat Squadron 5, was killed on July 1st when his MH-60S Seahawk helicopter went down in the Arabian Sea. 3 other sailors were rescued. He was not. The deaths in Jordan on July 17th. The death in Iraq on July 18th. 17 confirmed. A third set of unidentifying remains found at the Jordan site on July 19th. Verification ongoing. More than 400 American troops have been wounded in this campaign overall. The conflict has killed thousands of people across the region, the majority of them in Iran and Lebanon. At least 1,701 civilian deaths documented in Iran, more than 2,700 native descendants in Lebanon, millions displaced. Those numbers are not abstractions. They are the documented human cost of a war that is now in its 5th month with no end date visible. The night of July 19th, 8th consecutive strike. As CENTCOM processed the deaths in Jordan and Iraq, as the examination of newly discovered remains was ongoing, American forces were also conducting their 8th consecutive night of airstrikes against Iranian targets. Iranian media reported U.S. strikes near the city of Sirik in southern Iran and near Shadigan, close to the Iraqi border. An explosion was reported in Abadan. Iran's Atomic Energy Organization condemned a U.S. strike on a nuclear power plant under construction at Darkovin. The International Atomic Energy Agency said it was investigating. Iran responded in kind. Drone attacks struck U.S. military equipment at Kuwait's Al-Adiri camp and Ali al-Salem Air Base. Kuwait's government reported that a desalination plant had been attacked for the second consecutive day. Bahrain's air defenses intercepted an Iranian attack. Sirens sounded in Jordan, where the military said it had shot down 3 Iranian missiles. Jordan summoned Iran's chargé d'affaires in protest. The 8th night looked very much like the 7th, and the 6th, and every night before it. Neither side was stopping. The Shahid problem. One of the defining features of this conflict, and one of the reasons casualties have been so difficult to prevent, is the asymmetric economics of Iran's drone campaign. One of the primary reasons continuing downright conditioned human vigilance is the analyzing downed Leipakampse, Quishtetnik right hold the recent Lor Minawa listed as a Queek rifle busty. The Sigsvarnik interceptor, Shootin' Tort traveled for specific nightmares about the transporting and warming each ballist, a Tradic and Lamagoe's whisk. The 9th Aram got the cold windom that Weegeepers got the cold windom. A 3rd American service member fell to the Prialomos, some treaking cases leading to encampments of military collades, nor China, one of the most robust blueprints for intersection air forces. The downed drone, whose unexploded ordnance killed a U.S. service member in northern Iraq on July 18th, was one such weapon. The drone had been successfully shot down. The interception system had worked, but the ordnance it carried survived the crash intact. Drop. When the explosive ordnance disposal team attempted the controlled detonation, the weapon that had already been defeated in the air reached out and claimed an American life on the ground. That sequence, successful intercept, surviving ordnance, fatal detonation, is not unique to this conflict. It is a consequence of the sheer volume of Iranian drone operations that was not fully anticipated in pre-war planning. When hundreds of drones are entering a theater simultaneously, even a high interception rate leaves debris fields containing live munitions across multiple countries. Clearing those fields is dangerous work. July 18th demonstrated exactly how dangerous. What the record shows, concretely. As of July 20th, 2026, 17 United States service members have been confirmed killed in the war that began on February 28th. A 3rd service member's unidentified remains were found at the Al-Azraq attack site in Jordan. Verification was ongoing. More than 400 Americans have been wounded. The ceasefire announced in June has collapsed. Nightly American strikes against Iran are continuing. Iran is striking back across 6 countries. The Strait of Hormuz remains contested. The war has no visible end date. The names of the Americans killed on July 17th and July 18th have not yet been released publicly. CENTCOM is withholding their identities until 24 hours after their next of kin have been notified. They were doing their jobs. One was defending an air base in the Jordanian desert against ballistic missiles and drones. One was detonating a piece of Iranian ordnance in the Iraqi north so that it could not harm anyone else. Both are dead. The war is not over.